Simon Vickers, you may remain seated until I tell you to stand. You have been found guilty of the murder of your daughter, Scarlett Vickers, on the 5th of April 2024 in your family home. She was just 14 years of age, a normal, healthy young girl with a long life ahead of her when it was cut short by you. She died in the kitchen of her own home within minutes of having been stabbed. It went from an ordinary, happy family Friday night to tragedy within seconds due to what must have been your loss of temper. There is no other plausible explanation. You have never given a truthful explanation of what happened. Scarlett lived with you, her father and her mother, your partner of 27 years, Sarah Hall. There has been no evidence found to suggest you had anything other than a normal, loving family life. This was a Friday night. After work, you'd smoked some cannabis and drunk some wine. I'm satisfied, given the evidence, you drank more than the 3/4 of a bottle of wine or 4 glasses that you've said you drank. Scarlett came home and was in her bedroom whilst you watched football on the television. You then joined Sarah Hall as she cooked your evening meal. Scarlett came downstairs at about 10:15 to join you in that small kitchen. She and her mother were throwing grapes. You wanted them to stop. Sarah Hall then pinched you on the bottom from behind with some cooking tongs. As you turned, she caught your finger with the tongs and you said, "Ow." Scarlett then said words to the effect of, "Dad, don't be a wimp." Sarah Hall turned her back to resume cooking and heard you say to Scarlett, "How would you like it?" Exactly what then happened, only you know. Scarlett said, "Ow, ow," and Sarah Hall turned to see her standing there injured. There was no knife in her because I'm satisfied you'd taken it out as part of the stabbing motion. It would not have been possible for Sarah Hall to have missed it unless it was already back on the kitchen surface where you placed it and where it was later noted to be when the paramedics arrived. I have no doubt that you had hold of the knife before, during, and after Scarlett was stabbed. Scarlett died as a result of a single knife wound to the left side of her chest. This had breached the chest wall between the 5th and 6th ribs, going through the lower part of the lung. It then passed into the left ventricle of the heart where it ended. The approximate wound tract was about 11 centimetres. But the knife also had to pass through a fluffy nightgown, top and bra. And this was not the result of trifling force. The stab into the heart caused blood loss into the chest cavity, and it's this blood loss that caused her quick death. To stab Scarlett, you must have been close to her. She was also stabbed in part of her chest, normally protected by the arm. After being stabbed, Scarlett stood in the area close to the back door before she collapsed. As Sarah Hall said, the last thing she must have seen was panic on your faces. Sarah Hall made the 999 call. The paramedics arrived at 10 to 11. The police officers also quickly attended. Police Sergeant Thompson stated that you could see the paramedics and that you, together with Sarah Hall, were stood at the doorway. She asked you to go into the living room and you said to her, "We were mucking about." She noticed that you were heavily intoxicated, your speech was slurred and you smelt of intoxicating liquor. Mr. Brearley, the paramedic, also thought that you were under the influence of drink. Having seen and heard all the evidence, including that of Mr. Crowe, who did not express a view that you were intoxicated, and also that there was no concern in the police station, I am satisfied that you had drunk more than you said you did. However, I cannot be sure of the part that alcohol played in this offence. It's likely it played a significant part, but I can't be sure about that to the criminal standard. Scarlett was declared dead at 23:50. Simon Vickers, you've given different accounts of what has happened. Specifically, that she was stabbed by accident, that you've been throwing knives, that you'd thrown a spatula or tongs, that Scarlett lunged towards the knife, and that you were swiping tongs along the kitchen surface. Indeed, the unconvincing and wholly implausible version of events you gave to the jury involved you swiping tongs along the kitchen surface before them flying up into the air, and that you'd not even been aware of a knife before or after Scarlett suffered injury. Indeed, you said knife wasn't in any equation except when Sarah Hall had been cutting onions. Given the evidence of the pathologist, this was clearly untrue. She came by that fatal injury through your hand. As the pathologist said, your arm needed to be braced at the time of the stabbing motion. You have never accepted exactly what happened, although you have accepted that it was your actions that caused her death. Your beloved daughter deserved the truth. You have not given it. For the grave offence of murder, there is only one sentence by law that I can pass, and that is imprisonment for life. And that is the sentence I shall impose upon you in due course. However, I am required to determine the minimum period that you should serve in prison before you're eligible to be considered for release on parole. It is most important that you and everybody concerned with this case understands what the minimum term means. The minimum term is not a fixed term after which you will be automatically released, but the time that you will spend in custody before your case is considered by the parole board. It'll be for the parole board to say at that time whether or not you will be released. If and when you are released, you will still be subject to licence, and this will be the case for the rest of your life. If, for any reason, your licence were to be revoked, you would be recalled to prison, and when you would spend the rest of your sentence in custody. In coming to the minimum term, I must decide where this case falls within Schedule 21. The starting point here is 15 years. The knife was not taken to the scene. It was picked up whilst you were in the kitchen on the spur of the moment. However, the starting point is not necessarily the end point, and I must weigh up aggravating and mitigating factors. As for aggravating factors, the obvious and seriously aggravating factor is that Scarlett was 14 years old and a child in her own home. Although your father and daughter relationship does not fall within the scope of the Domestic Abuse Act 2021, as Scarlett was not yet 16, the principles in the Domestic Violence Guideline apply, as you were living in the same household and your relationship involved an expectation of mutual trust and security. Scarlett's age and the domestic context of the offending behaviour make this offence all the more serious because it represents a violation of that trust and security that normally exists between a child and parents. Domestic abuse offences of all forms are regarded as particularly serious within the criminal justice system. This factor warrants a significant increase from the starting point. You have previous convictions. You're now aged 50, and in 1993, when you were aged 19, you were convicted of wounding with intent using a knife on the face of an adult male. You received 2 years detention. But that conviction was over 30 years ago. You have some more recent minor convictions for dishonesty, the last being in 1999. I accept Mr. Lumley's submission, and given the age and lack of relevance of these convictions, they have not increased the sentence imposed. I have thought anxiously about the role of alcohol in this offence. As I've set out, you were under the influence of alcohol. I'm not sure that cannabis had any material effect on you. The fact that an offender is voluntarily intoxicated at the time of the offence will tend to increase the seriousness of the offence, provided that the intoxication has contributed to the offending. However, I'm not sure, applying the criminal standard, that alcohol did contribute to the offence, which I'm driven to conclude was a flash of anger. As for mitigating factors, I accept the factors outlined by Mr. Lumley. I accept that immediately after you stabbed Scarlett, you were devastated by what you've done and have since been a broken man. You've lost your only child at your own hand and will always live with that awful fact. I also accept that this was a momentary act of anger and there was no premeditation. I'm also not sure that there was an intention to kill and sentence on the basis that there was an intention to cause really serious harm. You must be given credit for time on remand. You have spent 217 days in custody for this offence. I direct that if the surcharge applies in this case, it should be drawn up in the appropriate amount. A transcript of these sentencing remarks will be attached to your file for the benefit of the parole board. Compensation is not appropriate. I wish to praise the work of the police and the prosecution team. It's been of the highest quality, and the public and the victim in this case, Scarlett, have been well served by it. Such work rightly deserves public recognition. Stand up, please. Simon Vickers, only you know precisely what happened in that kitchen on that Friday evening, which led to you fatally stabbing your own daughter in what should have been the safety of her own home. What the jury were clearly sure of is that you have lied and given various different accounts of how she sustained injury. You well know what happened. Given that you must have held the knife firmly in your hand, that the stab wound was 11 centimetres deep and caused with sufficient force to cause bruising in the surrounding area, the jury was sure that you had an intention in the moment of stabbing her to cause really serious harm. It was a momentary but devastating act of anger. It stole one young, precious life, ruined your life, your wife's life, and Scarlett's relatives and friends. Will never, ever recover entirely from it. The clock cannot be turned back. You must now face the consequences that the law dictates. Simon Vickers, for the murder of Scarlett Vickers, I sentence you to life imprisonment. You will serve a minimum term of 15 years, less the 217 days you have served on remand. You may go down.